Lucha Libre plays a large part in Chupa. So I was curious if you're a fan of Mexican wrestling and, because I really loved getting to see the footage of the old wrestling, and then we see some moves brought out later on as well.
No, I mean, thank you very much for having me. And Lucha Libre definitely, growing up in Mexico, I was a huge Lucha Libre fan. And I think, it's such an acrobatic sport, but it is also a sport that comes with narratives. Each character has a mask, and the mask itself has its own story. And, like, there's a narrative to the sport that is really fun as a kid watching. And so, when we decided to bring that into the movie, I was very excited. And, like, then afterwards, the old matches that you talk about, like, it was really fun because I hired professional Lucha Libre wrestlers in Mexico, and we filmed them in, like, in La Arena Coliseo, which is a really important place for Lucha Libre. So it was a really fun experience to get to see all these luchadores and see. It's really impressive what they do. It was really fun.
That's awesome. And, the chupacabra has a lot of mythology to it. I remember when, like, they would stop talking about Bigfoot. Eventually, the shows I would watch would do episodes on the chupacabra. So, how familiar were you with the greater mythos of the chupacabra, and how exciting was it to use it in this movie?
I was very, I think I was a kid in the 90s when the myth started. It started in Puerto Rico, but it really quickly spread all over Latin America. And I was a kid in Mexico, and, I was very, I saw it everywhere in the news, and it was very exciting, this idea as a kid that there could be a real magical creature outside your door, So I think that was something very exciting, and I think that's something really cool about the myth of the chupacabras, which is, like, unlike Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster, which are older legends, the chupacabra started in the 90s. So in a way, as a kid, that made it more real because it was, like, the first time people start talking about it, It's so new, it has to be real. And to me,
That's
it
awesome.
was exciting to be able to bring that into a movie nowadays that turned it into, like, a kid discovering this creature.
Yeah, and I loved Christian Slater in the movie. He's such a fun villain in it. But you don't really go too over the top with it. Can you speak to using him as a researcher and not making him a super cartoonish villain?
Well, first of all, working with Christian was, like, incredible. Like, this whole movie was a trip down memory lane for me, and Christian was like a face I grew up watching. And, when building the character of Quinn, it was important for us that he had, like, he wasn't two-dimensional, and that he actually was a scientist going after the creatures for a reason that maybe would have a good purpose to it. And, we definitely shaped the character. A lot of this movies shaped after Amblin movies that I grew up watching. So there's a lot in Quinn of Sam Neill in Jurassic Park, and also the character in E.T., the man with the keys that is going after Elliot, where they're characters that are at the end are scientists that have a purpose after going after this creature.
And then my last question, I love the element of just taking pride in your heritage and embracing yourself. Can you just speak to that theme and what it meant to have such a great message in this movie?
Well, I think growing up a fan of Amblin movies, the one thing that I was missing in all of those movies is that they happened in the U.S. I didn't get to see my context, my reality in those magical movies. So suddenly, it became very exciting, the idea of doing a movie where I got to bring a Mexican kid that had grown up in the US, so he didn't know a lot about his culture, and bring him into Mexico and have that as an excuse to show all the sides of Mexican culture that are rarely shown in cinema. It was very important to me to just show all of those sides. And on top of it, it was Mexico in the 90s, which was the Mexico I grew up with. So besides showing all those sides of Mexico, it was also showing to the younger audiences nowadays things that to them seem so foreign, like Game Boys and Walkmans, and just playing with those elements.